Hey friends, welcome back to the channel again, and for those of you who stumbled onto my video for the very first time, my name is Eric. I am currently a fourth year medical student studying in Sydney, Australia. This will be the first of many videos detailing my journey into medical school, and what better way to start this off than with an admissions video, right? So I go to UNSW's medical school, which is also known as the University of New South Wales, and when I was applying for it, there wasn't really much content online that really distilled the admissions process into a clear, concise manner. Granted, there is the university's website online, but it didn't really provide like a personal touch or a personal feel to it. And so by creating this video, I hope to provide you guys with some sort of guidance as to what you should have under your belt in terms of the scores that you receive on your tests, experiences, etc., that will maximize your chances of getting into UNSW's medical school. So let's get straight into it. In terms of gaining admission into UNSW's medical school as an international student, there are mainly three main criteria that the uni uses to rank their applicants. And so the first one is academic merit. The second one is the admission test, and you have the option of either taking the ISAT or the UCAT Australian edition. And then finally the interview, and we'll explore more of these in depth in the upcoming sections. Okay, so first starting off with academic merit. So this is a section where there's bound to be a lot of variability, mainly because not all of us will have gone to the same school and be enrolled into the same curriculum. So taking me as an example, I went to an international school that's predominantly based on an American curriculum. So if any of you guys ever went to an American international school, you're probably familiar with the SATs and the AP subject tests. And so when I was applying for medical school, I applied with the scores I received from these tests. On the other hand, you might be in a completely different situation and you're probably enrolled in a school and a curriculum that's drastically different from mine. And so I have friends in my year who applied with the scores they received from the GCE A-levels exam, which, if I'm not mistaken, leans a bit more towards the British curriculum. And I also have some that gained admission into medical school with scores that they received from the IB exams as well. And so yeah, there's really a lot of variability when it comes to academic merit. Now onto the more juicy and exciting part. So at this point you might be asking me, Eric, what are the scores I need exactly for my application to even be considered? Well, if you look at this table I pulled from UNSW's website, it states the minimum scores required for your application to be considered. So let's go back to my example. I took the SAT, the after 2016 version, and the minimum score required is a 1370 out of 1600, which is roughly the 94th percentile range. And again, another popular test the students take is the IB as well, and if you look here you can see that the minimum score required is a 38 out of 44. So the reason why I say bare minimum is because although your application will be considered if you hit these required scores, you still aren't guaranteed admission, mainly because, as I alluded to earlier, UNSW ranks their applicants based on the three criteria, which again are academic merit, the scores you received from the ISAT or the UCAT, and the interview. So if you want to be a competitive applicant, your best bet is to maximize your scores in all three of these domains. So again, going back to my example, although an SAT score of 1370 out of 1600 was only needed for my application to be considered, I aimed a lot higher than what was required, and so when I took the SAT exam for the second time, I scored a 1540 out of 1600, which roughly puts me in the 99th percentile range. And this is not to brag or anything, this is just me sharing my story so that you get sort of like a more realistic perspective of how competitive it is to get in, mainly because UNSW is quite a popular medical school in Australia, and it's also the #1 choice for high school leavers or domestic applicants to apply from the state of New South Wales. The next section is the admissions test, which again, you have the option of taking either the ISAT, which is the International Students Admissions Test, or the UCAT. So just a disclaimer, when I was applying to medical school, UNSW only allowed international students to take the ISAT. So if you're willing to take the UCAT, I'll put some links to some really good UCAT preparation videos in the description box below. So yeah, go check that out. And yeah, I don't think I can say much about the UCAT, mainly because I don't think I'm qualified enough to speak on it since I didn't take it. For the ISAT, however, I can definitely speak for it. And the ISAT is a really tricky exam, mainly because, first and foremost, it tests you on a broad range of concepts and skills. So think basic mathematics, reading and comprehension, grammar even. And these are all skills that you've been acquiring for multiple years. And so it's really hard to jam-pack all of these into a few weeks or months of preparation. So that's the first issue. Secondly, there aren't a lot of preparation materials online. There are some sample papers on the test provider's website, and you can also purchase a practice paper. But even then, I still don't think these papers prepare you well enough for the exam. And then finally, it's also, the exam is very time constrained. So if I remember correctly, it's 100 multiple choice questions that you have to complete in 3 hours. And all of these multiple choice questions come with a really long stint. So again, the minimum score required for the ISAT, and I checked it quite recently, the minimum score required is a 165. Again, adding a little bit of personal touch to it, I scored a 188, which, if I remember correctly, is in the 80 to 85 percentile range. With all of these tests, like again, going back to academic merit and also the ISAT exams or the UCAT, you really want to maximize your scores in these, because if you maximize your scores, you are much more of a competitive applicant. And so when you are in the top echelons, you have a higher chance of getting admission into medical school compared to if you are in the lower ranks. So that's just the reality of it. Now we're at the last bit, which is the interview. And the main takeaway that I can give you guys is to start practicing early. When I was applying to medical school, I applied to a total of 3, and I got an interview offer for every one of them. And I can say that by far, UNSW's interview process is the most relaxed. Compared to the other medical schools, I found that UNSW puts a lot more emphasis on your personality and also the factors that made you want to pursue medicine. Obviously, I can't be sharing the interview questions with you because I don't want to get sued by my uni. But on that note, the advice that I can give you is to start with the generic questions first. Things like, why do you want to pursue medicine? And practice these generic questions to the point where it becomes second nature to you. Once it becomes second nature to you, you can dive down into the more specific and intricate questions, things that touch on, like your personal experiences, any community or leadership roles that you've held in school, etc., etc. So that's how I would approach the interview questions at UNSW. But again, it will be a long, rambly video if I go in depth. If you want a much more comprehensive video, I'm happy to make if it has enough interested. So please make sure to comment down below. So that brings us to the end of the video, and for those of you who stuck all the way to the end, I really do appreciate it. The life of a UNSW medical student is pretty great, if not the best. Obviously, I'm biased, but yeah, hopefully the content I covered shedded some light into the admissions process at UNSW's medical school. And for those of you who are applying, I wish you all the very best. But yeah, that's pretty much it from me. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.